and welcome to Inside Edition to discuss national, regional and international issues in depth. The Kingdom of Bahrain has set a high bar in the region regarding the global fight to combat human trafficking with the implementation of a wide range of measures that have been recognized in the latest U.S. State Department report on trafficking in persons, the TIP, which has placed Bahrain in the Tier 1 status due to being fully compliant with the Trafficking Victims Protection Act standards for the elimination of human trafficking. Such achievements is a result of tremendous efforts exerted by several government institutions, especially those of the National Committee to Combat Trafficking in Persons, headed by Chief Executive of the Labour Market Regulatory Authority, the LMRA, Wissam Al-Absi, who will be joining us today in this studio to talk more about the efforts and initiatives the government has taken in the field of combating trafficking in persons, which led to maintaining the kingdom's high status for the third year in a row. Welcome back to the studio. Joining me here is Mr. Wissam Al-Absi. Thank you very much for being with us. Mr. Absi, first off, we really want to congratulate you for, again, another amazing achievement, acknowledging Bahrain's tangible progress when it comes to combating the scourge of human trafficking. This global pandemic has not stopped you. These issues that the whole world are facing have still made you capable of reaching that Tier 1 again. What can you tell us about that basic recognition?
Well, I'm actually very pleased reading the actual report that came out from the Department of State in the United States. I've been reading these reports with a fine-tooth comb every year, going through them, not only Bahrain's, but other countries, trying to learn something. And the language this year is heartwarming. The language this year is different. It recognizes a significant element of what we're doing, which is the sustainability of our efforts. Yeah. If you read the report, you will, or even compare it to Bahrain's previous Tier 1 reports, you will see a change in the language. The language actually stresses the sustainability, that we went from having efforts into having systems, into having an apparatus over there. What had happened last year, 2019, we restructured the Labour Market Regulatory Authority. We reorganized it. I have created 4 new departments that weren't there before. These 4 departments cater to the needs, the protection, the services of migrant workers, as well as other workers, Bahraini workers as well. So I have a department that caters to the self-sponsored migrant workers. I've got another one that is in charge of wage protection. I have one which is protective inspection. The fourth one is the flagship, of course. It is the protection and grievances department, the one that manages the secretariat for the anti-trafficking. Going from a committee-based, activity-based approach into a structural system where you have departments and directors and staff and people whose job description is to protect, is to combat trafficking, is to alleviate vulnerabilities, is what has been recognized. Of course, in addition to many other things that we've done through the reporting year of 2019. But we have moved from people who are on a mission, trying to get something done, which was a successful mission, into people whose jobs is to do this day in and day out, people who would be evaluated in their job for doing so. This sustainability was one of the main things that was recognized by the report this year.
Yes. Mr. Absi, I mean, when people hear that you have upgraded the procedures and the policies, it's not something that just happened on paper. There were actual cases where these upgrades helped in being quicker, more efficient. What can you tell us about, not the cases per se, but the procedure that you helped people with?
A good example to do this, in November 2019, we launched the digital version of our national referral mechanism. To start with, Bahrain is the only Middle Eastern country that has a national referral mechanism, digital or otherwise. When we went digital in November 2018, we became the first country in the world to have an end-to-end, fully digitized national referral mechanism. Now, what does that do? The national referral mechanism, we log into it every case, but also every phone call, every visit, every question we have. So far, we have close to 18,000 logs. Now, not all 18,000 are trafficking, thank God. Not even 50 of them are trafficking. But the way we take on everyone and we register, even a phone call asking for something or a walk-in requesting clarifications, that gives us an insight, a database of what the problems could be, because it is a repeated question, or a database of what a misconception is, where we need to focus our awareness for the migrants or for their employers or for the community at large. So the concept is very easy. We decided as a policy to have an open door approach. Anyone can come with anything, whether it is our job or not, because somebody has to receive these people, somebody has to point them in the right direction, which is what we do. But we take these in and we log them. So what happened? We realized what was going on. We realized, for example, that for labor cases, labor disputes, unpaid wages, people would come to us and we tell them, this is with the Ministry of Justice. You go to the labor dispute office and you log it there. And then after a month, we gather these numbers, we call our colleagues in the Ministry of Justice and ask them. And we realize that fewer than 50% actually go to the Ministry of Justice. They find that the majestic building of the Ministry of Justice of the courts very intimidating. They find it to be something that they don't feel comfortable with.
Unattainable.
Exactly. The language services, the translation over there may be an issue. So once we started logging these cases, comparing numbers, I went to my dear friend and colleague, the Minister of Justice, and I told him, we need to do something. And we both agreed that the LMRA in 2 of its branches will open satellite office for the labor dispute section of the Ministry of Justice. So my staff act as proxies for the Ministry of Justice. They would receive the complaints, they would enter it into the system, give the man a receipt, and at that point his case will be into the Ministry of Justice, into the court system, logged for a court appearance. By just doing that, because people feel comfortable, over the years we built the trust with the migrant community, they feel comfortable coming to us. We reached that stage through analyzing where a shortcoming is. Bahrain's judicial system is good, and the labor case management system is really good. They render a decision in 60 days. They're doing it well. It's free of charge for the worker. But the location is intimidating. These big columns, these big stairs, there is something about courts that makes people afraid.
Fear, of course.
And what we did is that we did them in regular offices with easy access. And this is access to justice. Justice exists, but we need to give people access to it. This we launched in February this year. The Minister of Justice and myself. And so far we have logged over 600 cases, and things are becoming better. So we are a learning organism. We do something, we see what it gives us, we adjust, we go forward, we adjust, we go forward. The way we did this is a way that doesn't allow us to neglect, because the system is giving us the reports. It has to be there. The approach that we're doing is a very simple one. It's part of our SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals, is leaving no one behind. And that's what we're doing.
I mean, that's amazing. You mentioned His Highness Sheikh Khalid bin Ali's involvement, as well as other ministries, and I'd really like to take the opportunity to basically also put out that as Bahrain International TV, our main viewers are the expat communities, our people that we address this, why we do these shows even with the LMRA several times now, is because we want the expat community to know the information that is latest available. And you can also, if you have any questions on how to contact the LMRA or any of their services, our Instagram accounts as well as other social media outlets make that a possibility. And as you said, social media is less intimidating now, so it's easier for people to communicate when it comes to that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, the kingdom's efforts in protecting human rights came as a result of His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa's Al Khalifa's insightful vision and comprehensive reform approach. How did His Majesty the King's vision lay the foundation of the path towards accomplishing such gains?
Well, if you move without a vision, if you move without the overall big direction, you may get somewhere, but you won't get far. The entire idea, the way we operate is that we take on a government procedure with a judicial procedure, with a security procedure, with an immigration procedure, but we add to it social awareness, we add to it cooperation with civil society. We can't do this, and we can't go far with this had it not been a philosophy of the country as instigated by His Majesty. Absolutely. It has to be part and parcel of our collective mission. I can go places, I can go some distance, but I can't go all the distance on my own. I couldn't have done it. No one could have done it unless it was part of a collective effort that realizes His Majesty's vision. And it is His Majesty's vision from the very beginning that Bahrain should be a safe place for everyone, that equal treatment, that equal rights, that access to justice, access to swift justice is there. And this is something that we are proud to do. We couldn't have done it had it not been part of His Majesty's bigger vision.
Right. I mean, when you really look at all of the initiatives that Bahrain has approached and the organizations that have become something out of this world, I mean, you're talking about the LMRA that grew within the last 5 years in such a way that it's not comprehensible. I mean, it's been there for a longer time, but you can see the growth the last 5 years. You have the King Hamad Global Center that helps in putting the dots on top of tolerance, on top of coexistence, that kind of stuff. And all of these institutions actually work together in order to serve the expat workers of the island. And this has also shown during the pandemic. And this is the next thing I want to ask you about. The pandemic has hit the whole world. And in Bahrain, there was no discrimination between healthcare services to the citizens and to the residents. All of them received the same healthcare services, all of it for free, and the care and the humanitarian aspect of it caused Bahrain to be really recognized globally, not just from the WHO, but other organizations. What can you tell us about the services provided to expats?
Well, Bahrain, like the rest of the region, has the unique position of having a large percentage of its population being migrants. Right. And the number one approach that one has to put in mind, because we've lived abroad, we've felt how it is to, although the country is nice and they have laws, but you feel in times of crisis, you feel alone, you feel that you're vulnerable. You may not be really vulnerable, but the internal feeling of being a migrant or being somebody living outside this country will not go away, especially in times of crises. So at the very beginning, and this is I think around February, we thought that the biggest problem we might have with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic is that we might have migrants in Bahrain who have the symptoms but are afraid to come forward. They hear rumors that, if you go, you'll be locked up, or you'll be deported, or you won't be treated right. And if they don't, then they pose a greater risk to their surroundings and to the community at large. So at the very beginning, we started giving out the messages, the very simple messages. as directed by His Majesty the King, because His Majesty came out at the very beginning and said everybody receives medical treatment, no cost, no discrimination. We will have a firewall between your legal status and your medical needs. We did that from the beginning. Then we, towards late March, early February, we decided we need to take it one step further. So we issued a general amnesty on migration issues. Anyone who's in Bahrain on any type of irregular or in any type of irregular situation, they had, we announced an amnesty that lasts till the end of 2020. So come and fix yourself. Get access. We suspended any action that might be misunderstood as targeting irregulars, and that worked. I'll give you a very simple example. In reality, on 1st of April, when we issued the amnesty, we had the population of irregular migrants in Bahrain was about 57,000. Today, they're 45,000. Regardless of layoffs, regardless of people losing their jobs, regardless of the economic situation that is directly connected to COVID-19, we have dropped the number of irregulars. We have fewer irregulars in Bahrain in the last 3 months than we've had before the pandemic. As a matter of fact, the 45,000 is dropping every day by an average of 600-700. But to reach 45,000, we have helped around 38,000. Okay, so what we did is build this link that when we tell people, you have contributed to our economy, to our society, to our country in the good times, you're part of us in the bad times. We'll take care of you, you're welcomed, you're wanted, you're needed. Come forward, and nobody will ever take a decision that would harm you.
That's amazing. I mean, in preparation for today's episode, we actually did call the LMRA anonymously in order to get information on what the procedure is to legalize one's status, and it's a very easy procedure, very simple information is needed, and that's why anybody that is watching the show or does see us contacting the LMRA is something where you get all of the information at one take, at one time, right? Well,
the beauty of what we did, and this is something we're doing it for the second time, so we've got an experience in it. We did a general amnesty in 2015. The migrant worker himself does not need to do anything. Find a new employer, find a job, and your employer will apply for you. And you don't need to go, you don't need to come, there's no process that you personally have to do. Just have your employer apply for you. There is something for you to do if you want to become a flexi worker. But again, the process is done end-to-end remotely until the permit is even issued. Then we need you to come for fingerprinting, photo, to give you your new ID card. But other than that, there is nothing to be done. We realize we are in a times of a pandemic. We don't want to put anyone at risk. So if we can do it remotely, if we can do it from a distance, we'll do it.
And the simpler it is, I think the more people will actually approach doing this. Bahrain's immense efforts to tackle the negative humanitarian and economic impact on workers under the current exceptional circumstances gained vast international appreciation, including that of the Director General of the Information Organization for Migration, the IOM. Now, he noted that Bahrain's efforts proved that there are effective ways to deal with the coronavirus pandemic according to humanitarian principles and rules. How do you value this recognition, and how can the kingdom spread its successful experience across the world? Is it used as a template?
Well, I'm happy for this. This was tweeted actually by Mr. Antonio Vitorino, the Director General of the IOM. And I know Mr. Vitorino personally, met him several times, and they keep track. And at the time, he was referring to us regularizing 17,000. We're approaching 40,000 now, and I should update him. The world watches. The world watches how we behave, how everybody behaves. It is your true nature will come in times of crises. If you claim to be a humanitarian, if you claim to be inclusive, if you claim to have a modern society that absorbs everyone, it's not what you say in times of milk and honey. This is the time that people will watch if you walk the talk. And they watch everybody, we're part of it.
Right.
And they took notice that we were working towards alleviating vulnerabilities. The number one problem that you'd have is not the virus. You can put a mask, you can sanitize your hands, but if you're vulnerable in times of a pandemic, then you're susceptible to other sorts of harm.
Absolutely.
So for us, we're removing the vulnerabilities or assisting in removing the vulnerabilities and keeping an open door. And the IOM, as the United Nations Migration Agency, they are the agency that in charge of all migration activity around the world, they keep track, and we've got a very strong partnership with them.
Yes. When it comes to the world watching, it's really important to also remember that the world watches not to scrutinize. The world sometimes watches to learn. And Bahrain has, during this pandemic and even before, but really been under the spotlight during this pandemic because of the fast reaction of the leadership. His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, put together the Corona Task Force within days of having the first case, even before that actually. And the heads or the people that are basically within this task force are working together with all kinds of organizations, whether the Ministry of Health is working with the Ministry of Justice or working with the Ministry of Labor Development. All of these organizations are working together. What can you tell us about the cooperation between the LMRA and these organizations?
Well, I mean, it's a one government approach. It has always been. It was a one government approach before Corona. It's definitely going to be a one government approach in this time. We are in constant coordination with our colleagues. No one is ready. No one has a previous experience to deal with a pandemic such as this. But we're working on learning from it, and we're working on tackling it as a single government. We work very closely with our friends at the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Interior, Labor and Social Affairs, as well as other like the Royal Humanitarian Institute, like the Bahrain Human Rights Institute. We're working with all of them. The willingness, the strength is there, and we're learning as we go along. One government approach, always been that. That's
amazing. The Kingdom actually will host an anti-human trafficking center that will provide training to experts around the region with detailed digital database, the one you mentioned, in cooperation with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the UNODC. Can you tell us more about that center and the importance of the services it will provide?
Well, we hosted an intergovernmental forum for the region with 9 countries and 2 UN organizations back in October. The first of its kind in the region. We called for it and hosted it. And over 3 days we sat and we discussed our challenges. And one of the challenges is having a region-specific standard operating procedures, training manuals, addressing issues that are unique to our region, again, because we have a different demographic composition. And at the end, it was a recommendation that the center would be set up, and the 9 countries kind of asked if Bahrain, because of our leadership in the region in this issue, Bahrain would take it on. And we did take it on. We started working on it. We signed with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime and with the International Organization for Migration to help us put together 8 programs, training programs, as well as SOPs, standard operating procedures, for very specific issues. Example, specific training for emergency room doctors and nurses, how to spot a potential trafficking victim, even if this person does not declare they're a victim. How to spot the victimization signs. This thing is written by doctors. Training will be delivered by doctors to doctors. We just need to put it together. There is another program that is dedicated to airport staff, whether they are immigration or customs or even the McDonald's people there. The idea is very simple. Trafficking is a cross-national crime. It's a cross-border crime. You can spot trafficked people, regardless of the types of trafficking, if you're working at the airport. Now, anybody with some training can spot it, but in an airport you have a small window. How do you act on it? How do you verify it? Who do you call? What is your standard operating procedure there? And these are 2 out of 8 that we're working on. I could continue. One of which we're working on is actually a standard training for media personalities. Okay, the idea is we cannot create awareness alone. We need our partnership with the media, whether they are television or newspaper reporters, but most importantly, even social media influencers. We need to train these people to deliver the message right. Anybody can deliver a message about a crime that happened, can report on a crime, but we don't want that. We want to elevate the awareness with society. And society comes in different languages, it comes in different socio-economic setups, so you need partnership. One of the programs we're developing, and this we will be offering through multiple channels, including Bahrain University, but as well directly with us, is for the media and for the mass media personalities, creating partners so they would help us spread the good word.
I mean, it's amazing, especially that what you're saying now is also going to cut short any rumors that run around. And we know that social media is filled with rumors, but once there is a proper way of talking about the news, having your facts straight, having confirmed sources, having the right pictures, all of these things, this makes any kind of help that you give even stronger and gives the authority more of a power in order to do something. Isn't that so?
Oh yes, of course, of course. We can only do it if we have the right partnerships, the right people. If we reaching minds of people is easy, but touching their heart is a real task. And we need to touch people's hearts because this is a human affecting crime. And in order to do so, we need to approach, knock on every door and approach every possible partner that we can have. And with this, the whole of society should be our partner, and this is our approach towards it.
Touching people's hearts is something Bahrain has been doing for a very long time. Before we end the episode today, I really want to ask you, now there are a lot of NGOs that came on, there are a lot of private groups of people who came together to help the expat workers of Bahrain, in addition to what the LMRA is providing, in addition to other things. And this kind of cohesion is seen very rarely, but not in Bahrain. Bahrain is seen all the time, even with a pandemic or without a pandemic. People of the island, residents of the island, citizens, all of them usually come together to help each other out. And there are like very small organizations such as One Heart Bahrain or One Love Bahrain that came and started providing food for the expat workers that were laid off for a time being. The LMRA helps in other ways in order to get all of these together to have a successful kind of phase out of the pandemic. So what can you tell us about the help of these private institutions, these NGOs, or these people or individuals that take it upon themselves, as well as your future plans for the LMRA?
Well, Bahrain has always been vibrant when it comes to the social network, particularly for migrants. I'm heavily dependent on my partnerships with migrant clubs, migrant societies, even unofficial groups.
Yes.
We use them because this is your approach to disperse information and refute any kind of rumors that are, or misinformation that is out there, but also to understand what challenges there are that you might not know. These organizations, whether they are migrant-led or Bahraini-led, have come together in a brilliant way in this crisis, and we have reached a situation where we would be in the middle because of our relationship. We would receive phone calls, for example, or requests. We have donors giving 5,000 meals. How can we get it? So we act as the broker, not a broker, but we act as the intermediary between between the donor and the person who's going to disperse it. And it worked beautifully. But more importantly, and this is where people really don't realize it, I'll give you a very simple thing. The Fina Khair campaign, as led by His Highness Sheikh Nasser bin Hamad, it has created around $100 million worth of donations. By the way, a big percentage of that was dedicated to support the most affected migrants by the pandemic. And so you've got a system that creates this campaign. You've got $100 million coming from all walks of life, businessmen, individuals, everyone, and it goes to everyone as well. It looks at Bahrain as a single society, and a big chunk of it had gone towards supporting, whether direct financial support or providing meals. Because, by the way, this is very interesting. The Ministry of Interior has, from day one, worked on providing all kinds of meals across, even before Fina Khair started.
True.
And they were delivering meals every day in every area of Bahrain. That, in my opinion, is amazing. It's not amazing that they're doing it, but now the migrants associate a policeman with assistance, with help, with care and compassion, and not just police work. This crisis has brought together society, and I think we will have a lot more trust because people stopped doing their job as individuals and began doing their job as humans. And they extended a hand, and when I see footage and I see photos of policemen handing out meals and handing out support, I know that in the years to come, in the back of the heads of all the migrants, the sight of a policeman means care, means compassion, means help. This would help us fight crime. This will help us bring the society together. And there's a silver lining in every cloud, and I think this is one of the silver linings of the coronavirus cloud.
Yes, especially, I mean, what you just mentioned about distributing the meals. The Ministry of Interior, as well as the Ministry of Information Affairs, actually did a couple of campaigns in different languages in order to address migrant workers. And the Ministry of Interior went down on the street, and you could see the number of policemen that do speak the language of the migrants. It really brought them closer. They understood better. They were more comfortable talking about their issues at that point. The LMRA has a very bright future. What are the plans for your future?
Well, my goal has always to be a learning organization, an evolving organization. I think once the dust settles down from this crisis, there is a lot to be learned. We need to find out what went wrong, how can we fix it, how can we bring the community together, how can we work, because again, yes, we survived it well so far, and hopefully we will survive it till the end, but we must not just look at it as a test. We must see the results of this test and analyze where, and everyone has shortcomings. We have to learn from it. I think the LMRA is right now sitting, my colleagues at the LMRA are sitting, analyzing, crunching the numbers, trying to understand how we can put plans, and I promise you'll see some beautiful things in the near future.
Always will. Thank you so much for being with us. Mr. Sam Al-Absi, the Chief Executive of the Labour Market Regulatory Authority, and we'll see you soon, inshallah.
Thank you.
We thank you, dear viewers, for watching us, and see you next week in another episode of Inside Edition.